Well, I'm Lee Taiz, as you just heard, and I'm the first of the three artists that are going to be speaking today about art and artists on the Central Coast. And you'll be hearing from me and from Jennifer Colby and Judy Stabile. And I should mention that I've put business cards for all of the artists that are mentioned here on a little table by the door. So if you'd like to contact any of them, you can pick up their cards when you go out. And we're going to save time at the end of this program so that you can ask questions then. And the end of the program will be after Judy Stabile talks. And then we'd like to have some questions from you. Because art is such a powerful form of communication, it's been argued that art is an inborn instinct, an evolutionary advantage in the Darwinian sense. No human society has ever been without it, so far as we know. And much of what we know about early societies, even historic civilizations, we glean from their art. And that was brought home to me very strongly when I was working on the History of Science book, Flora Unveiled. Past societies were always immersed in art, just as we are today. We can learn a lot about ourselves by the kind of art that we're immersed in. I'm going to be talking about a particular kind of art, representational watercolor painting, and I'll be showing work from some of the members of the Santa Cruz Watercolor Society, one of the oldest art organizations in our county. Aimee Nelson is president of the Watercolor Society. Aimee grew up in New Orleans. Impressed by the interrelationship of the arts, she graduated college with a double major in writing and art. Her graduation thesis was a solo show of abstract oil paintings, but she later changed from oil to primarily watercolor. Why watercolor? Aimee explained by saying, "The paper, the colors, and the flow of the water feel friendly and right for my voice. My work in this medium tends towards storytelling, and it's often quirky and nostalgic," unquote. To me, this portrait of the Mississippi River and the next painting both feel nostalgic and suffused with a sense of loss. Looking at these, we might think about what has happened to New Orleans in recent years as we all face climate change everywhere. This double portrait is called Simply Two. Aimee often engages with the natural world in her painting. She calls this one Spoonbill Pretzel. Aimee's wonderfully unique sense of humor is evident in much of her work. She says, this piece, entitled Reaching, is an example of the simply absurd. In a similar vein, Aimee recently created a deck of cards, all 52 of them, called The Kids, supposedly by E. Carrot. The Four of Diamonds introduces us to the characters BB and Harriet Tawa from the Balloon Adventures, also written by, she says, E. Carrot. The Queen of Diamonds, we have Princess Brown White, cowgirl, math whiz, and expert hula dancer. Sometimes Aimee's series paintings turn into little books. Here are 2 pages from the story of Lulu, a hairless cat personally known to Aimee. Lulu sleeps the sleep of the secure and the innocent. New Orleans Song is a very different kind of little book. Aunt Sally's Praline Shop in the French Quarter of New Orleans has belonged to the Aimee's family for a long time. Here are 2 pages from New Orleans Song. The moon glows stunning, the rain rains wetter. Aimee's beautiful Z series, we follow a young girl into different times of her life. Aimee knows Z very well because she's Aimee's granddaughter. Z's room is encompassed with meaningful images. Z's heritage, focused on her ancestry, is beautifully symbolic and complex. Here she is with a pelican, maybe a Santa Cruz pelican. Aimee has created a unique use for watercolors by including pieces of them in her lovely paper mache bowls. This photo of Judith Feynman was taken by photographer Cindy Margolin at the OLLI picnic at the UCSC Arboretum. A New Yorker by birth, a Californian by conviction, Judith studied watercolor at UCSC in Cabrillo. Since the 90s, her work has been an essential part of the Watercolor Society exhibits at the Art League and the Blitzer Gallery. As a member of the Coastal Art Alliance, she provided paintings for businesses and nonprofits. You're probably familiar with Judith's work as an author, as well as her work as an artist, because of the Capitola Village Mystery book she co-authored, The Jewel Box Mystery, and A Killer Festival. Like her books, Judith's landscapes often feature her hometown, Capitola. Locals will recognize the iconic bridge, Little Sailor, on Soquel Creek. In Sunset at Aldo's, Aldo's Harbor Restaurant is immediately recognized as a classic by almost everyone who lives here. It brings back delicious memories. This is the perfect time of the year to consider her painting The Perfect Pumpkin, the iconic vegetable here on the Central Coast. She calls this painting Just Joy. I believe the creation of joy in our lives is one of the most important purposes of art, especially of decorative art. You can appreciate how dramatically Judy changes her palette to create a sense of place in her Saturday market in Jamaica. From her colors alone, we know we're in a tropical environment here. Her sense of place is immediate. Nancy Howe's art studies were wide-ranging, beginning at UC Santa Barbara, and then in Dallas, and in England, and in Indonesia. She felt Dave McGuire's influence in his Black Point painting trips to Spain, Portugal, Croatia, and Greece. This photo of Nancy at work was taken in Portugal. Nancy's a longtime participant in Santa Cruz Open Studios and Dunard Open Studios, and she's a 9-year veteran of the California statewide exhibits. Numerous galleries in California and other states have featured her work. Here's one of her furry friends. At home in Bonnie Doon, Nancy is surrounded by an extensive garden, vineyard, and orchard. Here's beauty and lusciousness from the vineyard. These pairs went from orchard to table. I love the sense of tranquility that flows from this painting. And Nancy creates from the redwood forest where she lives. Here are a few of her neighbors. Nancy's paintings of the natural world reach from the sky to the depths of the sea. She reminds us to care about the natural world everywhere. I can't resist leaving watercolor briefly to show some of Nancy's rose mauling. Rose mauling was developed in Norway in the early 1700s, and it lifts the spirits just as well here as it did in old Norway. Here's a close-up of a couple of pieces from the shelf. On the Santa Cruz Watercolor Society's website, Linda Lord writes, "I love paintings, the things that nature offers. As a bird watcher, gardener, scuba diver, animal lover, my sources of inspiration are boundless." Because so much of Linda's work has been published by fine arts publishers, everything from home decor, apparel, greeting cards, and art prints, the style of her painting may have some pleasantly familiar feel. She's represented also by the Tile Mural Store. Linda has been the best-known watercolor teacher in Santa Cruz for a long time. You can find her at the Art League. These underwater paintings were selected from a series commissioned by the Intercontinental Hotel Presidente in Cozumel, Mexico. Linda travels to Cozumel to dive and to teach watercolor every year. The Cozumel Museum has hosted 3 one-woman shows of her work. She brings us the magic of an underwater world that not all of us will ever get a chance to see, but she makes us love and treasure it through the beauty of her paintings. Sometimes, because we live near the Monterey Bay, we see dolphins dancing in our waters, and Linda's paintings of these travelers make us love them all the more. Artists help us to understand and love the marine environment as much as scientists do. They support our wildlife by inspiring love for what we have. Linda's tropical bird portraits are especially beautiful and accurate because she raised the birds herself. Here's a white cockatoo. But as a devoted naturalist, Linda appreciates our common birds here just as much. She sometimes frames these within the beauty of her garden. Linda's dedication to animal welfare has led to an international clientele for her pet portraits, and she generously contributes her portraits to animal welfare fundraising events. Personally, I use my imaginary cat Libra as my Facebook portrait. We really don't look that much alike, but I'm not as adventurous as Libra either. She's a captain of a starship, but I like to identify with her. She inspires me. And of course, real cats in my life inspired the image of Libra. I enjoy remything through art. I especially like revising folklore to rehabilitate female images. Take the age-old wicked witch trope, for example. This witch is obviously devoted to good works. She's hanging up the stars. Another witchy team is responsible for rekindling the candles of the sun, and just in time, too, before they all go out on the winter solstice. Then there's the Snow Queen. I've always felt that Hans Christian Andersen and C.S. Lewis gave the Snow Queen a bad rap. I really think she's a lot more like this. And I agree with Nancy. Owls make very good neighbors. I was flattered that 2 great horned owls were actually roosting in my garden while I was preparing these slides. The fantasy paintings represent my second childhood. In my first childhood, my main obsession was with wild plants. Growing up with easy access to what still today passes for wilderness, the Wasatch, White Cloud, Sawtooth Mountains, and the Snake River Canyon, I could always find them. As a kid, I didn't have a camera, so I spent my time drawing them. Unlike picking, art is a form of possession that doesn't wilt. Sometimes childhood obsessions don't fade either. By good fortune, I spent most of my adult working life in a plant biology lab on this very beautiful UCSC campus. I still love wild plants, and I still do botanical illustrations. Here's a California flannel bush twice, first as a botanical illustration, and second as habitat. Native plants support all kinds of wildlife. Everything here is a native Californian, and so are all of these. Our gardens are habitat too. I have a small city garden, and over time, I've counted more than 35 different kinds of birds there. Our small gardens add up. I'd like to leave my part of this program with a question. The character, Frau Lippo-Lippi, in Robert Browning's poetic monologue, justifies his paintings by saying, "We are made so that we love, when we see them painted, things we have passed perhaps 100 times nor cared to see." Can painting make a difference by helping us to love the world we've built and the natural world that sustains us? If we love it more, will we be more likely to try to take care of it now when everything is threatened by climate change? Many artists hope so. And that concludes my part of this program. Now I'd like to introduce our next speakers. First, Dr. Jennifer Colby. Dr. Colby was recently named a Champion of the Arts for Monterey County. She's a visual artist, community activist, curator, scholar, and professor emeritus of California State University, Monterey Bay. One of her seminal publications is Arts in the School and Community. The book provides professional development for teachers who need to integrate community-based arts into their curriculums. She's been a gallery owner for 23 years, first at Galleria Tonantzin and presently of Luna Gallery, an eco-art studio in San Juan Bautista. The eco-art studio engages the community in ongoing art workshops that integrate ecology and equity concerns. She'll be discussing curating, creativity, and community. Following Jennifer will be Judy Stabile. Judy Stabile is a visual artist who has explored a variety of media. Working as a sculptor and a 2D artist, she now combines both passions in creating fiber art and collaborative installations. With Pajaro Valley Arts, she's curated over 30 visual arts exhibits over the years. Judy co-founded the annual exhibit Sculpture Is in Sierra Azul Nursery and the public art project Movable Murals as well. She played a lead role in the recent acquisition of a permanent home for Pajaro Valley Arts in downtown Watsonville, raising over $1 million to close escrow on a spacious historic building. Judy has been the recipient of the Gail Rich Award, the Paul Harris Fellow Award, the Be the Difference Award, the Cesar Chavez Award, and a Woman of the Year Award by the 18th Congressional District. Her topic today will be art and community. Judy will be our concluding speaker. After her talk, I hope you'll have some questions for us. And now here's Jennifer Colby, followed by Judy Stabile.
Inviting us? Nope. Thank you, Lee, for inviting us. Is that it? Yeah, okay. I had the opportunity many years ago in Berkeley, California, to teach an OLLI class. And one of the things that was that stuck in my memory was one of my students was like, well, all these years I had my kids come home and they wanted to show off their artwork. And now I'm going to go home to my kids and put my thing on their refrigerator. So I'm familiar with OLLI, and over the years I've had that opportunity. And just another piece of introduction, I haven't been to the campus in a long time, but brings back memories as I did a double major here in biology and art many years ago. So I'm going to talk a little bit about my teaching and community activities and then focus in on my own artwork. In the Liberal Studies Department in the College of Education at CSU Monterey Bay, I had the opportunity to provide the course that teachers took to, in one semester, have visual art, dance, drama, and theater, and music. And I created a textbook during COVID, because during COVID I had to take a very hands-on class and make it into a digital Zoom class. And so it was a perfect time to create an electronic textbook. But my passion for educating future teachers also extended into work in the community with some colleagues to train teachers regarding the use of the arts in their classroom, idea called arts integration. So what I was doing was not necessarily making art teachers that would be specialists in the arts, but I was encouraging teachers who would be elementary school teachers to use the arts every day in what they do, and to use the arts in the service of learning subject matter, but also of what we call social emotional health of children. And that has become an important thing in our state of California. Recently, we have funding to, the arts funding for schools goes up and down and up and down, but recently we have some new funding under Proposition 28 that is finally bringing more arts and music to our schools, which is one of my passions. And I brought that idea to the students through the lens of community art as well. Over the years, I've been doing a lot of community art projects. The latest one that I've been involved in, we started in 2019 in San Juan Bautista to paint mandalas on the street. So these mandalas are about 40 feet wide, and we get pictures from drones so we can see what they look like at the end. But it's an interesting process, and our focus has been to give a voice to some of the stories about Indigenous people in our city of history, and also to explore the natural world and ecology. And over the years, I, as a curator, and really as sort of an activist curator, I've done a couple of projects around watersheds. And this is a little memory of our Creeks of Salinas, the Gavilan watershed experience. And I also did a watershed at the Pajaro watershed experience from the Pajaro River. And the idea of the watershed experience was to pull together artists to have them really explore the watershed, to take photographs, and we did what we called the river of photos. What you see in the picture are these long 24-inch high and hundreds of feet long rivers of literally photos grouped together. And it gave people a sense of the connection between the upper watershed and the lower watershed. And right now, I received a grant from Monterey County Arts Council, and I'm going to be doing a new watershed exhibit on the Elkhorn Slough Carneros watershed, which is, well, many of you know Elkhorn Slough, but the Carneros, the river that comes into it, comes out of my hometown of Aromas, California. And in San Juan Bautista, I'm doing classes and speaker series in the Eco Art Studio, which is what you see here. We did a series on art and wellness, and the goal is to reach families. We're working with the students in the after-school program, and we're bringing in their families. And we had different topics like food and wellness, and also just like learning. We had artists who came in who work with kids to learn to breathe and use art as an imagination to help students with healing. And again, it's working with that idea of the social emotional health of people through the arts. And in the present moment, I have a gallery in San Juan Bautista called Luna Gallery. This is the gallery space, and this is the studio space. And over the years, I've been involved with San Juan Bautista. Galleria Tonantzin was 1992 to 2013, and 2022 to the present, we're in Luna Gallery. And San Juan Bautista, you know, is a very small town. A lot of people come through from Santa Cruz or from Monterey, or a lot of people come from the Bay Area or the Central Valley. And as one of our mission towns in California, we have tourists that come looking for a sense of history, and we provide art for the tourists, but also for the local community. We collaborate with El Teatro Campesino, which is our local theater company, and it's just like right now, the exhibit that we have has artists from 4 different counties: Monterey, Santa Cruz, San Benito, and Santa Clara County. So we're sort of at the crossroads. We're a little town, but we're at the crossroads of many people coming and going. And during my curating and time with Galleria Tonantzin, Tonantzin is the word of our mother in Nahuatl, and it refers to Our Lady of Guadalupe. So I went on a little journey, a long journey, with this idea of doing a yearly exhibit called Images of the Virgin. And what it brought to San Juan Bautista was artists from all over, really the country, but a lot of from different parts of California, who were using Guadalupe in their art. We had a yearly conference. We will have one this year on December 7th. I wrote my dissertation about this, and I'm working on a book. And it's really about this intersection of art and culture and female women empowerment, re-imaging, like Lee actually has had a lot of pieces in the show over the year. Lee's work re-imaging the fairy tales or the different ideas of women in the past is part of what's been in this ongoing exhibition. But I also found this little geography, and that's why I have this map here. Between San Juan Bautista's in the middle, the San Andreas Fault goes right through it, and at one end is Watsonville, the other end Hollister. It's this kind of this area that's underserved. I mean, I find it to be at the edge of 3 counties, which means you get like not noticed. You're not the center of anything. In Aromas, we have, the town is divided by 3 counties, and we have a large population of farm workers, and there's just a lot of needs and a lot of interest in supporting people and families. And the Virgin of Guadalupe becomes a symbol that's important to that particular geography. So I've been exploring that and also creating artwork related to that. So this is a piece of mine that actually was in the Pajaro Gallery in Watsonville and other places later. And it's a reflection on the Virgin of Guadalupe apparition in the oak tree in Watsonville, which happened in 1992. And people went to see her image on a tree. Tens of thousands of people came over the years, and I wanted to honor that through this installation. So why was I creating these layers of cloth and painting on them, bringing in natural materials? I wanted to reflect, just to close today, on my own artwork, which over the years I've used this form that I call the banner painting. And often they're two-sided, and they're usually one color. And these photos are from a retrospective I had at the Pacific Grove Art Museum during COVID when nobody came. So there I am with my mask. But these have been shown over the years. I'll start with this piece, which is called Marta. The green piece is about a friend in 1984. She immigrated from El Salvador to the United States. And I was working in Fresno, California with church people and a whole community group, and we were supporting Salvadoran refugees. And so with the banner painting, I wanted to tell her story. And so I'm basically choose a color to represent the person, and then I have collage elements that are in it. And as they are hung in the center of the room, you can walk around it and get a feeling of that person's story through the abstract color and the collage elements. For example, this one, the mother of Dominga Isabel, represents one of the mothers of the Plaza de Mayo. I lived in Argentina in the early 1980s, and I was fortunate to be able to march with the mothers, who are the women who went every so often to demand the return of their children who were disappeared in that conflict in the late 70s, early 80s. So they would wear on their head a scarf with the name and date of disappearance of their children. And so that's what I've represented in paint with the collage element in the paint. And I continue to use that form. These are later works that I did that the banners are stretched in a way that they can create a space that you can walk into with a structure. And again, I was exploring the themes of women that I had met in my time in Argentina, Nicaragua, and in the United States. And the idea of the banner, I create them with like many layers and layers of paint dripping on muslin. They're free, they're not stretched, and they often have a square that to me represents passing through, and each side has a little bit different message of hope as you pass through them. So in my artwork, I continue to use this sort of long, skinny idea and the squares, and these are small little canvases, but interestingly enough, they continue that form. And recently, during the COVID period, I worked on these banners, which were representing lamentations for missing and murdered Indigenous women. I used the image of the handprint, which is the image that activists have been using to show the concern for women who predominantly in Canada and northern parts of the United States, Indigenous women have been disappeared, and people were not able to find them, and there's part of the history of violence against women, and particularly Native women. So this was like a striking way to just bring to the public's awareness this plight. And I had information for people to look at. But some of these banner paintings, people over the years have said, they're so beautiful, but then when I get up close, I realize they're about something that's really difficult. And for me, that's a way that I've chosen to tell stories about things that are very important to me and very disturbing maybe, but I am using this sense of beauty because there's always a beauty in the story, but it brings you in, and art helps people to look at something that they may not look at otherwise. And I've used the banner painting as a backdrop for altars in different settings. And the same form I continue to use. These have paint on them, but less paint. This was a series of different, all the 21 missions in California, and I went looking for the image of Guadalupe in each of them. And this work with the long, skinny printout of photographs led to the work we also did with the river photos, which I collaborated with Janet Martinez to create these. So some of the issues have to do with ecology, and here we're looking at some of the parts of the river where people have dumped things, or there's damage from different issues. And that's why we're bringing again to people's awareness through art the fact that we have these, we need to clean our rivers. We need to know what's happening, that we dump something in the upper watershed, it's going to get to the lower watershed and eventually into the Pacific Ocean. And so some of the banners I'm doing more recently have to do with ecological ideas, the ocean health, or the fires, or the drought. And this one is one of my most recent ones. This is the Fragile Planet. And I'll end with this little story about this piece, because it has the world in the middle, and it has all these wonderful animals that are outside in the kind of like stars in the universe. And my grandson was about 4 or 5, and he just hated this piece. I'm like, why do you hate this so much? He says, because you can't split a circle in half. Like what? Like the fact that the piece was split. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this kid, like in his gut, he got what I was trying to communicate. That if we let the planet split apart and all our animals go flying off because we've destroyed them, then we've lost it. We've lost our fragile planet. And he got it from the art, just 4 or 5 years old. And he just like had such a visceral reaction to it. So you know that you're communicating when you get that kind of reaction from people. And I have hope to continue with the kind of community work I'm doing. This is a view of the eco art studio at Luna Gallery with young people who did wall-size collages and are now in this picture writing poetry. And I continue to work with the community, with community arts, and bring that passion for the way that arts can communicate stories and hope for the future. Thank you.
That's not my first slide. And back the other way. It didn't transfer over.
Are they in the right order?
No, something happened. We're missing 2 slides, 3 slides. This one. So that's the one, and then the next one. Before this one. There we go. That's here, right? Okay, thank you. Leave it to me to have technical difficulties. I'm Judy Stabile. Thank you so much for having me here today. I'm going to talk a little bit about my art practice and how I work in the arts community in the Watsonville area. So my text isn't coming up for some reason, but basically I grew up in the Los Gatos area. I received my liberal arts degree from West Valley College, went on to San Jose State and earned my BFA with an emphasis in art history. And like every lost child at that point in time, I went out in the world to find a job and ended up in human resources. Worked in the San Jose area for 7 or 8 years, and then my husband and I decided to move to Watsonville. And I was lucky enough to get a job with the County of Santa Cruz in human resources and worked for a number of years for the counties of Santa Cruz and Monterey before I retired. But when I was when I moved to Watsonville, and that was about 1986, I found that I had time and the desire to do art again. When I was at San Jose State, I really didn't find a studio art practice that I wanted to delve into. And at the time, Angela Grova started Art School Santa Cruz, so this was 1986, and I said, okay, I'm gonna take an art class. And you know, I went in with my little suit and my legal yellow pad, and the class was stone sculpture. And you know, they just said, try it, you'll like it. And so I worked with Angelo at Art School Santa Cruz until 1989 when he closed the school due to the earthquake. And I learned stone technique, and it was all by hand, hammers, chisels, files, and sandpaper. But it wasn't until I moved, I didn't move, but I took courses in Pietrasanta, Italy, and Carrara, Italy, where I learned how to use power tools. And then I started working big, and I loved it. And mostly I worked in marble. Sometimes with the sheep, I would have a stone piece cast into bronze, but primarily I was working with figurative work. But stone has its own limitations. It requires a dedicated studio, big equipment, air filtration, and it's something that you work on one project for 6 months or 8 months and you're dealing with form. And so I'm very influenced by the people around me, and Carol Bowie, who was an outstanding painter, or still is, decided she wanted to get into printmaking. So of course I wanted to get into printmaking because I wanted to spend time with Carol. And it was a really great experience for me because all of a sudden I could work with color and form and composition, and it was just a piece of paper. You know, if a 5-foot sculpture doesn't sell, what do you do with it? If a print doesn't sell, you put it in a drawer. I mean, storage issues really helped. You know, Sarah Walsh is here in the audience. We did a stint on paper making together. I just love working with other people. So my mom, Betty Heil, decided in her 70s that she wanted to learn glass. Well, of course, there were no courses locally, and so we went up to Portland, Oregon to the Bullseye Art Factory, or Glass Factory, and I learned how to fuse, slump, and cast glass. So these are some of my pieces from that period. So my sister Wendy, who's on the right, is a fabulous collage and assemblage artist, took a class from Daniela Wolf on the left on encaustic painting. So of course, what came next? Encaustic painting. And encaustic is painting with hot wax. And I am a total process and media junkie. I want to try everything, and if the process is complex, I really want to do it. So with encaustic painting, you fuse every layer with a heat source, which means a torch. And I mean, who doesn't love a torch? So this led me to my second career, and Wendy and Daniela and I started a school for encaustic art called Waxworks West. And we did that from 2007 till about 2018. We taught thousands of students over the years, all on weekends. Until we just couldn't work weekends anymore. We decided we need to have a weekend life. What I found is that not only do I like and am influenced by other artists, but I love working with other artists. And the slide on the left I did with my sister Wendy, and it's called Sisters, Cut from the Same Cloth, and it's an autobiographical piece. The piece on the right is the first installation that Wendy and I did together, and it's called The Family Room. And it was displayed at the Pajaro Valley Arts Gallery in a show that was called In This House That I Call Home. So the backdrop and the window pieces were done by Janet Fine, but the other pieces, fiber, encaustic, furniture, Wendy and I did. The biggest collaboration that I've ever been involved with was Curious, my text is gone, Curious Narratives and Imagined Memories. And I did that with Jean Beebe, who is a fabulous painter, my sister Wendy, who's in the middle, collage assemblage, and me. And it's like, well, I can't paint like Jean and I can't do assemblage like Wendy, so what's my role gonna be in this? So the Art League invited us in 2022 to take over the gallery. They wanted us to do an installation that they would just be us, the three of us. And they only gave us a couple of limitations. They said you have to be able to install it in 10 days from the date that the prior show went down, and you have to uninstall it in 7 days after the show ends. And so we started thinking, what are we gonna do? So Wendy, and this is a picture kind of mid-gallery looking back in space. So Wendy had this concept that she'd shown once before in a smaller scale at Pajaro Valley Arts, and it was called the Curator's Office. And it was the imaginary curator who was working on a cabinet of curiosities. And so this is her idea of what the curator's office might look like. So this was in the back of the Art League gallery. And then we did a series of 8 vignettes, all based on Wendy's assemblage boxes, and this was about botany. So in every box, she uses a real picture of real people, but creates a story around that, an imaginary story around the individuals and all the objects that they might have collected. So Jean, so this is one of the vignettes. So Jean did the paintings that you see on the left, and she also did Babs the dog. And then I did the staging that you see on the right and the costuming. And the costumes, each one has a series of pockets, exterior pockets, and in those pockets were items that that imaginary person might have collected. And that happened throughout the vignettes. We had the cowgirl. We had the inventor of the paint by numbers, and you see the cloth, the vest that I made on the right. So each vignette had a chair, a table with the assemblage, and then you'd look back into space at the painting and the vignette. And you might notice from the painted vest, I had fabric made up, fabric digitally printed, and then made the top that I'm wearing today. This was a young man who was obsessed by Christmas, Kris Kringle, and you see Jean's painting and my installation. And then on the right is the child-sized straitjacket that I did with, again, the found objects, because this was a definite obsession that he had. This was Dr. Lee's optical shop. These are our stationers, Gianni and Vito. We had the school marm, Annie McGuffey. And the one departure that we made was this vignette called Thoughts and Prayers. And it was our response to what was happening in the community, not in the community, but in the world. It was book banning, school shootings, the loss of LGBT rights, or the possible loss, the loss of women's rights. And so this was our response to what was going on in the world. So within the community, I live in Watsonville. So when we moved to Watsonville in '86, everything that I was doing was in Santa Cruz. I worked in Santa Cruz, my studio was there, my classes were there, and as a result, I didn't know my own community. Now, my husband's an apple farmer. He found his people right away. Me, not so much, at least within Watsonville. In 1990, the Pajaro Valley Arts Gallery that you see here invited me to show some of my stonework. And I thought, okay, that's great. I've got a show. Well, I was part of a show. And I became very interested in the gallery, and I loved the people and what they were doing. And Pajaro Valley Arts this is our 40th anniversary. I haven't been involved in all 40 years. And we do 6 to 8 rotating visual arts show per year. And I was very interested in the curatorial process, so I said, what does it take? Well, with a volunteer organization, you don't ask those kind of questions unless you're really interested. So they invited me to be a part of the gallery committee in 1996, and I curated my first show in 1997. And since then have curated a number of shows. And really what I found my people. I found people that had like-minded interests that I didn't necessarily make art with, but I could make shows with. And over the years, we've featured different artists, different community members. Mostly we feature regional artists' work. And in it was actually 2005 when we started, Mary Warshaw and I were curating a sculpture show, and we kept going out and visiting studios, and there was huge art that people were making, and we really wanted to feature that. Well, the gallery at PVA is 1,200 square feet of usable space and tiny rooms. And so we were looking for a way of featuring sculptures that really were meant to be outdoors, that were meant to be seen from a distance. And every day I would drive by Sierra Azul on my way to the gallery. And Mary and I said, well, why don't we stop there? They're on 152. And we talked to Jeff Rosendale, who didn't know us from Adam, didn't know the gallery. And he looked at us and he said, yeah, you can do a sculpture show here. So we did. And that first year was really inspired by Moto Otaki, whose piece you see on the right. And we visited his studio, and he does these beautiful kinetic pieces that are meant to be in the wind. And he looked at us and he said, well, how are you going to show my piece in the gallery? Are you going to put it in a window? What, how do you do that? So he was really the inspiration for us to move to another venue. And on the left, you see a piece that we had craned in by Aaron van der Kerkhove. And we have done the annual exhibit at Sierra Azul now since 2006. Jeff took 1 year off to refurbish the gardens. But what I found with curating shows is that I got to meet so many different people with so many different interests. And we were able to collaborate with different organizations. So Campesinos, Workers of the Land, we did with the Watsonville Film Festival. It was our least attended exhibit. It opened the week of the COVID shutdown and stayed in the gallery for almost 6 months, where we were able to open it up on a limited basis. But it was a beautiful show. Different interest groups, different subject matters. This was a show that Maria Gittin curated called Vote, Your Vote is Your Voice. And it brings different aspects of the community in that I might never meet otherwise. On the left, you see the lifelong learners, and on the right, you see a class from Watsonville High School that attended the show. Most ambitious show that I think I've ever worked on is More Than Cars, celebrating lowrider culture. And we did this also with the Watsonville Film Festival. And the average attendance at our shows at the Pajaro Gallery is like 600 to 800 people. The Lowrider Show brought in over 5,000 people to see the art and the car shows. We had multiple activities. We had discussion groups where the lowriders would talk about their clubs, their families, their life. And we reached a different part of the community that people that might never visit a gallery were coming to these shows, which was really fabulous. And the film festival had an additional 5,000 people that attended the films that they showed. This is a show, Immigration, Borders, Boundaries, and Beginnings, that we did in collaboration with the San Jose Museum of Art. Their show was Border Cantos. And this is Sarah Friedlander. She had the artwork on the front wall. But this led beyond the partnership with the museum, with the San Jose Museum, into a collaborative project that we did with the Pajaro Valley School District, where kids wrote their families' stories of immigration. They took photographs of themselves and their families. We superimposed the photographs over the stories, and then we wheat pasted the posters on the wall of the YMCA next door. We'd done 3 or 4 wheat pasting projects in the community before, and the city said, you know, no more wheat pasting, too dangerous. So, well, and a lot of cleanup and environmental issues. And so my idea was to provide a rotating space where artists in the community could work large scale. So what you're seeing here, this is Ramsey Park in Watsonville. The piece on the left was done by a middle school student, and the other two pieces were done by Watsonville High School students. And it's ganged up 4x8 pieces of plywood. So the plywood can be taken home or to a studio, worked on, and then brought back. And the city helps with the hanging because that takes care of all the liability issues. We bring the work to them. And so this is Ramsey Park. We also have installations over at City Hall right next to our Porter building, which I'll talk about in a second. And some of the iterations that we've done there. This again is PVUSD, students' exploration of their identity. So my biggest community project to date was the acquisition of the Porter building. It was a 3-year process to purchase the building. We started in 2019 and closed escrow in 2022. At the time, we had 2 city council members on our board, and they said, you know, we're bursting at the seams at Sudden Street. We don't have any opportunity to expand, but here's this vacant building on Main Street, the corner of Maple and Main. It's been vacant since 2014. The city owns it. Let's buy it. We had no money. We had nada. But we went and talked to the city manager, and so he said, well, you can't just buy a building, especially when you don't have money. We do have to open it up for bid. So in the bid process, we had an angel donor step forward and said, what is it going to take to buy this building? I said, money. He said, okay. And he helped pay for the building. It was the most amazing meeting I've ever had. And I don't like to ask for money. And then the Hewlett Foundation approached us. There had been some press around the competing bid. And they said, you know, it was actually Community Visions. They said the Hewlett Foundation wants to give money to an organization who can build out some sort of performing arts. And it was a very competitive bid process. There were 44 people that applied, or organizations, and we were one of 5 that received the grant. And so they paid $540,000 towards the purchase of the building. We bought it for $1.15 million. And our idea, this was the rendering back in 2020. The idea is on the left side downstairs, we would have retail space and gallery space. On the right side of the building, we would have performing arts space. Each of those spaces is about 1,500 square feet. The whole building is 12,000 square feet. Then upstairs, we would have a series of artist studios that we can rent, office space, and spaces to give workshops. So by moving into a building that is 10 times larger than where we are, we really have the ability to make this a community hub. And our vision for the building is to provide a safe, inclusive space where the community can experience and showcase their culture, their history, and their creativity. So that's where we are today. We need to do some remodeling of the building. As I say, it had been vacant for a number of years. And so now we need to raise about $4 million to do the renovations that we want to do. When we started the project, it was at 1.6 per the contractor, but you know, it's been years since we started the process. So that's what my life is right now. I'm raising money for a capital campaign, but I continue to curate shows. This is our current show that's at the Sudden Street Gallery. Wendy and I collaborated on the cardboard bits, and then the community came in and painted the backdrop. And the community painting was at the Porter Building, and that's the front wall of our Sudden Street Gallery. So we continue to do 6 to 8 shows a year at our Sudden Street location, sometimes activating the Porter Building when we can. We have a very small part-time staff and a very small operating budget, all things considered. But we'll stay at the Sudden Street location until we're completely built out at the Porter Building. Okay, that's all I've got.